and today we are reacting to his story. Yeah, but not videos. Because I'm actually don't want it anymore. So yeah, shorts we are doing.
Start over. You missed a spot. Our neighbor pointed at his hood from his porch chair while my brother and I washed both his cars before school. He told Mom we were playing too loud, and she handed us sponges and pointed at the door. That was Mom's punishment. Whenever we got in trouble, she'd send us to help a neighbor, and this guy took full advantage. One afternoon, he showed up at our door. Your boys wouldn't help me at the market. They need to learn some respect. Mom's hand caught my cheek before I got a word out. That night, we scrubbed his floors while he sat on the couch 3 feet away watching TV. My brother looked at me. Enough. We'd seen him bring women home every time his wife was at her shop. So when we were playing outside and spotted another one walk through his front door, we knew exactly what to do. We took our last coins, bought 2 ice creams, and walked to her store licking our cones with big smiles. We sat down and she laughed and asked how Mom was doing. We're good. We really like your sister, by the way. She's so nice to us whenever she visits. She stopped laughing. I don't have a sister. I tilted my head. The pretty auntie, she's at your house right now. She didn't even close her store, just sprinted out the door. By the time we walked home, bags and shoes were already flying through his front door while the whole block watched. He chased a pair of pants across the yard and she threw a shoe at his head. Those cars you make these boys wash every week? Mine. Everything here is mine. You don't own a thing. Boys, come help me throw the rest out. We tossed his shirts and carried his bags with the biggest smiles on our faces until every last sock. I was playing with my pet snake when my friend leaned over and stared at it with narrow eyes. Is it true that anacondas can choke people out? I told him yes, and he instantly leaned back in his chair and put his arms over his head. I don't think it could choke me out. I laughed,
Bro,
but Wesley
bro. Oh, sorry guys.
A kid came up to me by the...
No.
A kid came...
Nah, bruh.
I was playing with my pet snake when my friend leaned over and stared at it with narrow eyes. Is it true that anacondas can choke people out? I told him yes, and he instantly leaned back in his chair and put his arms over his head. I don't think it could choke me out. I laughed, but Wesley immediately sat up. I'm serious. Let your anaconda try choke me. If it succeeds, I'll give you $200. If not, you give me the $200. Deal? I thought about whether I wanted to risk my friend's life for $200. Then I shook his hand. Deal. I carefully placed Piper around his neck. Wesley smirked. You have to be pretty weak for something with no arms to choke you out, and I've been hitting the gym. This anaconda won't do a thing to me. Piper settled around his trachea, and I told Wesley, tap out once it gets too much. But he waved his hand dismissively. What kind...
Oh no.
Ey Marc,
Ja?
guck mal, ich bin jetzt im Schwimmen. Ich gehe jetzt nach Hause. Und wenn ich zu Hause bin, mache ich mit dir Video, okay?
Okay. Aber Bro,
Video. Ja?
ich mache jetzt ein Video und ich schaue so Shorts.
Wenn du Video machst, ja, okay.
Nein, egal. Ruf mich dann bei Roblox. Ruf mich dann, wenn wir Roblox spielen, okay? Weil es ist okay. Okay, sorry guys. This is actually my friend, by the way.
Waved his hand dismissively.
Yes,
What kind
he
of
wants
loser
to do
needs
a
a safe
video
word
with
for
me.
this? I'm ready whenever. Bring it on. I looked at him one more time, then gave Piper the signal. She started barely squeezing Wesley's neck, but his
Yeah,
His eyes instantly went wide. That's a lot, but I think I can hold it, he said, trying to look confident. I told him Piper wasn't even trying, and suddenly she squeezed harder. Wesley instantly gasped and tried to pull her off because his face had started turning purple. I asked, do you want to tap? But he shook his head, wheezing no, and pulling harder. I got this. Piper's muscles weren't even tensed, yet Wesley was now shaking in his chair, his veins popping as he pulled hard as he could. His face just kept squeezing. I was about to call her off anyway when Wesley began tapping out.
American, I'm actually Germany. Yeah, guys, I'm in Germany. But I'm just doing a video in English because I like English, bro. I like English.
Her off me, he wheezed. I snapped my fingers, and Piper instantly released, returning back to me. Wesley collapsed off the chair, holding his throat on the floor and gasping for air. He didn't have the air in his lungs to protest as I took my $200. I was playing with me and my best friend poked his dad's round belly during our sleepover, and I smirked. I bet you $5 I can bounce 10 of these marshmallows off your dad's belly without him waking up. Oscar aggressively grabbed my hand, grinning like the 5 was already his. Easy money. My dad is the lightest sleeper in the world. One time he came into my room and told me to stop breathing too loudly. I gently grabbed the marshmallow bag and lined up behind the couch, already dreaming of the pizza slice I was going to buy with the money. A pink marshmallow bounced off his belly button, and I banged my fist against my chest 3 times and whispered, 1 down, 9 to go. Oscar crossed his arms. Dude, you're toast. I ignored him and kept throwing. When I got to marshmallow 4, his snoring caught and stopped, but he kept sleeping, and I stuck my tongue out at Oscar to mock him. You're cooked. I landed marshmallow number 9, and his dad picked his belly button lint. He groaned, who touched the thermostat, but then he lifted his leg, stretched his hands under his head, and kept sleeping. I was 1 toss away. Oscar nervously his t-shirt over his nose, and my heart slammed as I whispered, 10 or nothing, and let it fly. But suddenly, his dad's hand snapped up and caught it midair, eyes still shut, and my whole body went cold. He opened one eye, and he put the marshmallow on top of his own belly button. That's 10 landings. Pay the man. I started laughing, and Oscar's eyes widened with shock. You were awake? The whole time? He sat up, and the marshmallows rolled off his belly button. Son, I never sleep. Through anything. Oscar dug a crumpled 5 out of his pajama pocket and slapped it into my hand.
Crazy.
I was still laughing when his dad picked up a marshmallow, bounced it off his own belly, and caught it in his mouth. Me and my best friend poked his dad's round belly during our sleepover, and I smirked. I bet you $5 I can bounce 10 of these marshmallows off your dad's belly without him waking up. Oscar aggressively
Life goes on and 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 on.
Wow, what?
up. Oscar aggressively grabbed my hand, grinning like the 5 was already his. Easy money. My dad is the lightest sleeper in the world. One up. I sat alone in the dark and cold interrogation room, my handcuffs bruising my wrists. Then the officer slammed his hands on the table and said, "You're looking at 10 years for destruction of property. I'll be back in 15 minutes to finalize the charges." He shut the steel door, and my hands slid across the metal table as I scanned the room for a way to break out. There had to be one. I wasn't going away for 10 years. I knocked on the wall behind me out of habit, and it sounded hollow. My eyes widened, and I immediately knocked again. Definitely hollow.
Sorry.
I looked at the clock and listened to the guard's footsteps fading outside the door. This was my window. I lined up my heel and drove it into the drywall. It cratered with a loud bang, and my heart pounded as I realized there was no turning back. I kicked again, and plaster dust poured out. The hole widened as white dust fell in front of it. I couldn't see the other side, but I could taste the freedom. The handcuffs sliced my wrists, and I just kicked again. It broke open, and that's when the steel door behind me started rattling. But I knew the cop wasn't fast enough. I hauled myself.
What?
I sat alone in the dark and cold interrogation room, my handcuffs bruising my wrists. Then the officer slammed his hands on the table and said, "You're looking at 10 years for destruction of property. I'll be back in 15 minutes to finalize the charges." He shut the steel door, and my hands slid across the metal table as I scanned the room for a way to break out. There had to be one. I wasn't going away for 10 years. I knocked on the wall behind me out of habit, and it sounded hollow. My eyes widened, and I immediately knocked again. Definitely hollow. I looked at the clock and listened to the guard's footsteps fading outside the door. This was my window.
What the? Why is it always like this?
I sat alone in the dark and cold, no turning back. I kicked again, and plaster dust poured out. The hole widened as white dust fell in front of it. I couldn't see the other side, but I could taste the freedom. The handcuffs sliced my wrists, and I just kicked again. It broke open, and that's when the steel door behind me started rattling. But I knew the cop wasn't fast enough. I hauled myself into the broken hole and ran through the blinding dust, laughing because I was free. But then my feet felt carpet. I squinted so I could see, and realized I was standing in the police commissioner's office. He was sat at his desk, flipping through my destruction of property file. You really can't help yourself, huh? I sat alone in the dark and cold, and the team huddled around my youngest at halftime, and the captain knelt and held out a folded homemade jersey. "We voted, bud. It's yours." He'd never played it down because his lungs couldn't take it, so he spent every Friday night on his big brother's sideline, screaming louder than anyone. He pulled it on right over his oxygen tank straps, and I had to stare at the scoreboard so nobody saw my face. The coach watched with his arms crossed and a face like he was chewing glass. Walking to the car, my youngest tugged my sleeve. "Dad, does coach hate me?" I crouched down so the oxygen tube was at my eye level. He's not what's important here. Your team voted for you. You are one of them, and nobody on that field gets to tell you different. I had no idea I was making a promise I would have to keep after he was gone. Weeks later, my youngest lay in bed, the oxygen tube crooked across his cheek. "Dad, can I have one more home game?" he gasped. He didn't have long, and my voice cracked. "You can have anything you want." On game day, my sons walked to midfield for the coin toss, my youngest's arm around his big brother's shoulders. He smiled the whole way out while I clapped until my hands burned. The coach started toward them to wave my youngest off, but the other team's captain stepped in his path and stared him down. My boys won the coin toss and the game. 9 days later, my youngest died. 3 days after the funeral, my oldest came home, eyes hollow. Coach's son just transferred here. Coach gave him my brother's number. My stomach dropped, and I drove straight to the school. The coach was at his desk, while his son sat in the hallway eating a granola bar. "Coach, I need you to retire my son's number. We just buried him. He didn't even look up from his paperwork. Your kid never belonged." Friday night, my oldest answered him by walking onto the field for the coin toss in his dead brother's jersey. The coach saw it and exploded across the field, grabbed the jersey, and ripped it off my son's back. I was halfway out of my seat when the captain who'd knelt with the jersey pulled a marker from his sock and wrote my youngest's number across my oldest's bare chest. Every player on the sideline wrote it on his own chest. They'd come ready. Within minutes, that number was on every flannel and booster shirt in the stadium. The coach spun in circles, surrounded by 1,000 copies of the boy he said never belonged. I sat back down because my boys were handling it. The team didn't wait for a whistle. They charged the coach and put him in the turf because my son was one of them, and nobody on that field got to tell them different. The team huddled around my... I was eating breakfast when the hospital called. "Your daughter has been in an accident." I put my fork down. "I don't have a daughter. She told us to call you, and she keeps asking for you by name. I don't know why, but I got in my car and drove straight there." At the hospital, a social worker stopped me in the hallway. She was hit by a car, broken ribs, a fractured wrist, a bad concussion. I started to tell her I'd never met this girl, but she put her hand up. "She woke up asking for you and she hasn't stopped. Whoever you are, she needs someone right now, because her parents aren't here." I walked in, and she looked so small in that big hospital bed, her face bruised and one arm in a cast. She reached for me with her good hand. "Dad, you came." I sat down next to her, and she smiled up at me. "How's Peanut doing?" I went completely still, because how did this random girl know my dog's name? I sat until she fell asleep, then picked up her phone from the table. She had no texts, no missed calls, one contact saved as my hero, and the number was mine. The photos were an empty fridge and a selfie she'd taken alone in an apartment with no furniture. I was the only name in this kid's phone. I found a nurse and asked if anyone had heard from her parents. They said they're not coming back from their cruise. She's stable and someone's already there. Someone was me. I set the phone down and sat in the chair by her bed all night. When she woke up and found me still in the chair, she started crying. "I know you're not my dad." For a second, I couldn't say anything, so I just let her talk. "I found your videos, the ones about getting through hard times, and I watched everyone because you were the only thing that helped when home got bad." She picked at the frayed edge of her cast, still not looking at me. "When they asked who to call, you were the only number I wanted. You can go. I know this isn't your problem." I thought about the empty fridge,
That's
the bare
crazy.
apartment, and the parents who wouldn't come home from their cruise. I pulled my chair right up to the bed and took her good hand. "I'm not going anywhere." That afternoon, I told the social worker I wanted to report the neglect and start the paperwork to foster her. 6 weeks later, she was unpacking boxes in her new room. Her parents didn't fight the paperwork. Peanut kept stealing socks out of the box, and she kept chasing him around the room, laughing. I was eating breakfast when the
Nah, bro, that's a W. But yeah, guys, hope you enjoyed. And there's Skyfall and I'm out.